what would you whisper to the younger Ross?
Oh my God, gosh. I guess like don't stress out over things that you don't have control over. I think it's probably a big thing. I don't know if there'll be any like massive sage kind of business advice that I would give my younger self, but try not to be stressed over those kind of things that you don't have control over. That's a really good question, isn't it? I suppose not being afraid of growth. So for a while I was like, I just like working for myself. It's easy, I control what I do, it's quite nice. But actually one of the nicest things I've found is like, as we've grown as an organisation and we have more staff, I get to work with really amazing people, and real change happens more quickly because those people are collaborating and we're working with each other. And that for me has probably been like one of the biggest joys in what I do, is like whether it's partners that I work with or whether it's my staff team, that's the bit that excites me and kind of gets me out of bed. And I kind of wish I'd taken that leap a little bit earlier, that kind of growth journey. And not, I think there's a danger like the growth journey, particularly a kind of startup space, it's like growth for the sake of growth, or often growth because someone just wants to sell their company, let's be honest. But actually, how do you create growth to actually achieve the things that you want to achieve and actually work with good people? And you can't do that without growth because you don't have the money to pay those people.
Oh my goodness, that's right. So Ross, imagine we are sitting here 10 years from now.
Okay, yeah.
What does success looks like for you as a person? What does success looks like for your company, the third lab, the third sector lab? And what does growth looks like for you, for the industry that you are playing in?
Yeah, so I mean, so even though I just kind of went off on one about growth, like I'm less focused on growth right now that's about like people or money. They help you achieve things. What I'm quite excited about is like we're at a point where there's a few things that we want to achieve and I think are perfectly achievable, and particularly in Scotland being really aspirational about what tech and the charity sector can do together. And I think that is really exciting. I think Scotland's a small enough country where you can build those pieces of collaboration. Government's receptive to that work, funders are receptive to that work, but there's also just like a lot of interesting people doing amazing stuff right now in Scotland. I want to aspire for Scotland to be the leading nation in the world, where it's a very boring aspiration, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I want Scotland to be the place in the world where there are more people from digital data and design backgrounds on charity boards than anywhere else. And through the digital leadership work that I've done, the charities that make change quickly and effectively are the ones that have trustees that get this stuff, governance that is given oversight from a board that can make change effectively and safely as well. So that for me is like one of the big aspirations. Growth would look like Scotland is leading the world in that space. On the training side that I mentioned before, like, as I said, like charity salaries do not always pay enough to buy a data analyst or the salary of a data analyst or a service designer or a high level developer. And actually what I would love is how do we increase skills and confidence in the sector so that a lot of those kind of core skills are in the sector itself and stay there. So, we've trained 15,000 people since 2020. I would love to grow those numbers. So growth for me would be, we have really strongly confident teams of people working in charities and community groups and social enterprises in Scotland. And another aspiration is like Scotland leads the way in that Scotland becomes the most digitally confident civil society. And Third Sector Lab's got a role to play in that, but there's other organisations like SCVO and CAST, things like Scottish AI Alliance doing amazing work in that space. But how do we be aspirational as a country? And I would love to think about Third Sector Lab having a role to play in that. But for me, it's not just like, let's train more people or let's get some people on boards. It's like, what does that actually look like as an end point? And that's the bit for me that's quite exciting.
So Ross, what's the problem you are obsessed about solving right now?
That's a really good question. I think for me, like there's the stuff around AI at the moment is both incredibly exciting and utterly terrifying, and I think anyone that says otherwise is pretty naive, to be perfectly honest. Like, we're going to, this chief executive Perplexity, I think it was Perplexity or Claude maybe, the other day came out with a statement of like, we need to raise tax levels specifically for AI firms, probably in the States, probably in Europe as well, because the changes they make in the next 5 years are going to have the biggest impact, not just in society as a whole, but taxation. So if people lose jobs, so if you look at Salesforce as an example, sacking 4,000 people, that is 45% of their support team, because 50% of interactions are now on AI. So on the one hand, that's exciting for them as a company, it's exciting for their shareholders. It's not very exciting for those 4,000 people. And for those 4,000 people, they're no longer paying levels of tax back into society that help you run the NHS or a police force or the social care services that we mentioned before. And that's a huge challenge for society. So for me, the thing that I find both equally exciting and terrifying is like, what is the charity sector's response to AI and how does it embrace it? And lots of charities at the moment have kind of really pulled back because they're like, this is scary for our workforce. We also have considerations around like data and safety, which some of them are very real. What I would love is, how do charities take those kind of small experiments with AI and look at starting small? So the small thing might be, we spend 14 hours a week just doing minute taking on meetings that we have one-to-one with staff. How do we take that 14 hours and we get it down to an hour across our organisation? Or we spend, every time we try and have a meeting with external partners, we're back and forward 17 emails. Could the AI just look at all of our diaries and tell us, here's the 3 times that you're all actually free, and then we book it in based on that, and we just saved 17 emails back and forward in how much time. So that ability to drive efficiency initially, that then allows you to focus on service delivery and really delivering that impact. So going back to your point of like, where does that pound that I give as a donation go? How do we maximise where that pound goes? And the biggest thing that I would love is like, rather than looking at this as like the efficiencies of sacking staff because AI has come in, is that how does someone in an admin role that is now going to be delivered 45% by AI, well, the exciting thing about that is it's freed up that person's time. Could they be retrained to do basic data analysis? Is there another role in the organisation that they might be more passionate about? And what I know from like frontline staff is like, if you're a counsellor working with young people and 10% of your working week is filling out forms, and an AI gives you back that time, that's 10% more counselling time for those young people in that school that you're working in. So that for me is like the terrifying thing of like, the very shape of society is going to change massively, but really exciting because it means that arguably we can deliver much, much more impact with the work that we're doing.
What's one story that people get wrong about you, and what's the true story?
I don't know if anyone's got any stories about me. Maybe they're like, I don't know. Does anyone that? I think the thing I said before, because I was speaking to a friend about like coming on this podcast, and they were like, they named someone else in the kind of startup scene in Scotland, and were like, every time I see him, he's really impressive, and he has this like very well crafted narrative about himself, and I'm like, I don't have any kind of crafted narrative about myself, so I don't know, like, I guess I've always tried to like let the work talk for itself rather than there being any kind of grand narrative about me per se. So I don't know, maybe there is like a dark story that someone's got about me that I don't know about, and I need to kind of counteract it. I'm not sure.
My goodness.
But yeah, no, I don't know if there is one. I don't know.
So one of the questions that we ask here is, we call the name of this podcast The Blueprint.
Yep.
It's to give people who want to go into this sector,
yep,
a blueprint of how they can, contribute to the society, make the world a better place. How do you think somebody should approach this? Just to preempt you, to let you know, I really, really paid attention to what you were saying. The first part is try to look for people who are doing what you are doing,
mm-hmm.
and for people who want to start from scratch, unless it's nobody's in the area you want to.
Yep.
How do you go about it? I want you to touch on that.
Yeah, so I think, probably it's not that different from classic startup stuff. Is like the big question. So if I was an investor in your startup, the big question I would ask is like, are you solving an actual problem here? Do you just want my money because you're going to do the same thing that 17 other people do, and maybe there is enough market share that you can do that. But why are you doing it any differently? And I think for me, it's like being able to understand society and communities and users and using that as your starting point. And what we've seen a lot in the kind of tech for good space is people with great intentions and probably very technically gifted. What they've not started with is like an actual user need.